And I think about this concept a lot. Ever since I saw the first episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I've been caught, thinking about the idea that grief is non-linear. No matter how much time passes, I find myself circling back to it. I exist there. That's what this video essay is about. Except, like all video essays, this isn't just about Star Trek. That's just the lens I'm using to examine the idea that's been stuck in my head these past few years. You don't even need to know anything about it other than that it's sci-fi. The point is,
time heals all wounds. Out of sight, out of mind. We've all heard these adages, but they're not exactly true, are they? Time doesn't magically make problems go away, though the distance may help. You have to look at it. You have to acknowledge it, interact with it, have a conversation with it. That's true for a lot of things, really. Relationships grow stale if you don't put in love and effort. Information fades when it's not used. And sometimes that can be intentional. People want to forget pain. But you can only bury things for so long before they start to creep back into your life, forming cracks you barely notice until suddenly they're unavoidable. Sometimes an event hits you properly months or even years after it's over. Sometimes it's sudden, but in my experience, it's been a slow burn that seeps in wherever it can, however it can. This can be through sadness or through anger, which in my case was really sadness in disguise, wanting me to do something with that feeling and pay attention. But then there's the real anger and frustration at the way a situation played out, the unfairness of it all, and your lack of agency. And then, eventually, numbing exhaustion when you're just out of emotional energy. In pop culture, there are countless examples of the 5 stages of grief, but I'd argue it doesn't always play out in such a neat, linear way. People are more complicated than that. They can pass through some stages, or all of them, in no particular order, each stage springboarding off each other. And sometimes you can have several at once. It's nice to have a shorthand, but grief is a tricky beast. You have to befriend grief in a way, to welcome it to your table and listen to its tears. Hold its hot little hand and not tell it that it's being too loud, but that yes, it hurts, and I'm sorry. Take as much time as you need. Our perception of time is ridiculously subjective. When you do any first aid training and you have to do something that requires counting, such as the 10 seconds for an EpiPen, you're always told to count aloud because people consistently count faster in their head under pressure. Ask any kid and they'll tell you that the clock races them at playtime, but drags its feet through English lessons. But that's the human experience. Our days and seconds follow neatly one after the other, with consequence falling into consequence, and our experiences preparing us for how the next domino will fall. There's plenty of opportunities to make life-altering decisions, but they'll always be informed by what's happened to you before now, even if the decision you make is to disregard past experience and plunge headlong into an unexplored path. That's still a choice born of discontent with your situation, and that came from all your past decisions. There's no escaping the linearity of life, and that's not a bad thing. It's not the jaws of fate closing around you imperceptibly slowly so you can't escape their trap. It's an exploration, a celebration of the unknown, and a creation of art from chaos. It's like putting together a multidimensional jigsaw and shaping it to your liking, painting it different colours and inventing your own universe. You get to whittle the pieces and arrange them how you like. So when Commander Benjamin Sisko of the space station Deep Space Nine encounters a group of aliens that don't understand either linear time or corporeal form, he has to confront what his past, present and future truly mean to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the scene for you. Deep Space Nine opens with a memory. Smoke and blaring alarms flood the corridors of a space station under attack. Everyone is scrambling to reach the escape pods, and Sisko's searching for his family. He ensures his unconscious son, Jake, is taken to a pod and finds his wife, Jennifer, under a collapsed girder, not moving. He tries pulling her free and begs a fellow officer for help, but his tricorder registers no life signs, and Sisko just can't process it. The information's just too shocking to sink in, so he barrels on regardless and keeps trying to pull her free. She can't be dead. He has to be physically dragged away from her body, crying and moaning that they can't just leave her. Jumping to the present, Sisko is being made commander of a new station, DS9. It's supposed to be a temporary position, while the original owners of the station, the Bajorans, clean up the mess the defeated colonizers, the Cardassians, have made of both their station and their planet. Sisko's there representing Starfleet as a sort of neutral party, to intervene if necessary and to guide peace talks. It's a bit of a delicate situation, and Sisko doesn't really want to be there. He'd much rather be settled on Earth raising Jake in a stable environment. Jake's not exactly thrilled about the new posting either, especially as the station's currently in a state of disarray, with a lot of broken food replicators, and there being no proper bed for him on arrival. But the promise of living somewhere with other children to play with gives him hope. It doesn't look great now, but perhaps it will in the future. Sisko's not off to a great start here either, with Captain Picard handing off control of the station to him. He's an experienced Starfleet officer, but, anyone who's seen Star Trek: The Next Generation will know that Picard got taken over by the Borg for a while, and, unfortunately, while that was happening, he led the attack on Sisko's old station, so he essentially killed his wife? This may be a fresh start for Ben and Jake, but opening this new chapter of their lives with the face of a man who in Sisko's mind is associated with, or perhaps responsible, for Jennifer's death is not exactly filling him with hope. Though it wasn't Picard's fault, there's a steely tension underlying their conversations. It's very short, sharp, and by the book. It's Sisko's first time back on an actual station too, and to be welcomed back to what feels like an echo of his last venture's pretty damn rough. Already, Jennifer's memory is cementing itself back into Ben's present. He icily requests a transfer down to Earth, even if that means taking civilian service. His time here is definitely intended to be temporary, a short state of flux until he finds a new position, so it's ironic that he ends up finding a permanent home here that he defends over and over throughout the series. Time never flows as we intend it. Now, Bajor's a very religious society. Their faith has kept them steady throughout the occupation and bound most of them together, something that every Bajoran has in common regardless of standing. Their religious leader, the Kai, therefore also holds a lot of political sway, and so, naturally, Kai Opaka wants to meet Commander Sisko and find out what sort of man will be playing peacekeeper. She measures his pa, or energy, by tugging on his ear, and I can attest to that being painful as fuck. A martial artist instructor has done this several times to me before, and said, I see, while twisting up my lobes.
Up my ear, please!
Anyway, Kai Opaka says, ironic, one who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary. With this, she shows him one of their sacred relics, a tear of the prophets. These are orbs suspended in a box that can grant visions of the past, present, or future, filtered through the psyche of whoever's viewing them, and are said to be sent from the Bajoran gods, the prophets. Their religion guides them, but also connects them as a people and fosters a sense of security and comfort. Their prophecies don't always work out the way people expect, but that's prophecy for you. I find it interesting that they're called tears, though. Tears imply a swell of emotion too strong to be contained. Sorrow, joy, awe, and wonder. The devout worshipper cries with the strength of their love for their gods. The penitent sinner weeps for their misdeeds and begs forgiveness. The one who's found comfort cries in relief as they can finally let go of their fear. One thing I find really interesting is that tears are chemically different depending on why they're being produced. There's the basal tears that are there to moisten your eyes and are mostly made of salts, water, and mucus. Reflex tears for defense, such as when you're cutting onions or exposed to tear gas. They've got some extra antibodies in, just in case. And emotional tears, which are full of proteins. Those proteins are stress hormones that have built up in your body, and so the tears are an easy way to get rid of them, which is why you feel better after crying. It's physically, literally processing the emotion. A soggy form of catharsis. Gives your system a bit of a clean. I have a really cool book on the history of crying in Britain by Thomas Dixon.
Let's just not question my interest for a moment.
That says that, in the Catholic worldview, tears could do things. They had real spiritual consequences for the souls of the penitent on earth, as well as the wept-for departed. There's power in expression, in how we picture the dead and the wishes we have for them to still be here. Those tears, or sometimes lack of them, demonstrate how much we cared for the one we lost, and force us to confront everything we felt about that person, good and bad and everything in between. We choose how to remember someone, and what stories of them get passed along, and whether we even want to preserve someone's memory. Some people get cut out of the family portrait, out of spite, grudges, or sometimes there's nobody left to tell their tale. I always find that one the saddest. the little mossy graves in a corner that are overgrown and weather-worn. When Sisko's presented with one of these prophetic tears, it dredges up all of his feelings he had about Jennifer, both of grief and love. With no warning, Sisko finds himself on a beautiful beach, hot sand burning his feet and the smell of the sea in his nostrils, the distant calls of gulls crying overhead. Though this is a vision, all of his senses are fully engaged and grounded in this pocket of reality, which he finds out pretty damn quickly as he hops up and down to protect his poor feet. I find it really interesting that all of his senses are active in this vision too. In therapy, when someone's having trouble connecting to the present due to panic, psychosis, or a traumatic flashback, the go-to coping strategy taught is to ground yourself in your senses. You list through things you can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste to reconnect to what's currently around you, but Ben is completely denied that escape. He has to look at Jennifer, and it doesn't fill him with pain but joy, as she's really there in front of him. It's everything he wants, but he can't stay. They have to separate again, because they already have been. The outcome's already decided. And this isn't just a vision, it's also a memory, the day he and Jennifer first met. She follows the script because, obviously for her, this is the first time they've had this conversation, but Ben is ecstatic at getting to talk to her again. He tries to rein it in and play it cool, but he's just too happy at seeing his wife, which is really cute. He offers her a lemonade, which has spontaneously appeared because, well, he had a tray of them when he lived this the first time, so of course there should be lemonade here, and walks with her down the beach, offering to cook dinner for her tonight. In his enthusiasm, he says that it's not every day you meet the girl you're going to marry. And Ben, buddy, that is super fucking weird to say to someone who doesn't know you, but luckily for him, it works out. Jennifer tries to laugh it off and asks if he uses that line on all the girls, but his tone suddenly becomes serious as he says,
"No, never before, and never again."
This vision is like a non-linear prophecy, which doesn't go forwards but backwards, and these events determine his future. Everything we do is affected by everything we've done. Our futures are a series of explicit and implicit choices, and everyone else's choices shape our own too, forming a collective sequential reality. I wonder if this vision really affected how past Ben met Jennifer, as he takes different actions this time due to already knowing the outcome, and he's not being careful about showing his hand either. Is this an isolated incident that'll reset, contained purely in the orb, or has Sisko somehow changed something in his own past? Humans work as a collective web of consequence, and when he leaves this tiny reality, Kaiopaka tells Sisko that he'll find the Celestial Temple of the Prophets, not for Bajor or Starfleet's sake, but for himself, and that it was a journey he's always been destined to take. The thing that leads him to his future is his past. At first, Sisko refuses the role of emissary because, well, for a start, this isn't his religion. He's effectively been asked to accept being the messiah to gods that he doesn't follow. To him, the prophets are just another species of alien that he encounters in a wormhole, not sacred beings, and he definitely doesn't feel qualified to guide the Bajorans in their faith. That would definitely be sacrilegious, and manipulative as hell for someone with this much political sway in their future. That's what the people expect of him after he leaves the wormhole, but the prophets only said that his role is to be a guide. And that's the job he signed up for here, isn't it? Just on a much smaller, non-theological scale. He's supposed to be a mediator between Bajor and the Federation, and even then, this was only meant to be a temporary assignment. The time he expected to spend here changes. His future is reshaped as new connections and friends are made. He's also pretty uncomfortable about being treated like a messenger from the prophets by some of the Bajorans, but in the end, he can't change their perception of him any more than he can change their perception of their gods, and he just ends up having to accept that and get on with his life, making the best decisions he can as a human being and treating everyone he meets with respect. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is effectively about a grieving widower and single father being made into the reluctant messiah of an otherwise inconsequential alien world who he's decided to protect. I also really like that this is a sci-fi show that doesn't decide that religion is a backwards, irrational, or primitive thing that can all be waved away with science, and that Sisko doesn't decide to try and disprove the prophets as sacred, or ignore all of the customs of the Bajorans he's working alongside. He expresses that he wants Major Kira to treat him as Benjamin Sisko, not as the emissary, and though she takes a little time to adjust, she respects his wishes and becomes a firm friend because she loves who he is, not what he represents. And he respects her faith absolutely. We've never really gotten over the Enlightenment age of the 18th century, and though I don't belong to any formalised religion myself, I firmly believe that there's value in belief. Saying that aloud sounds a little circular, but it's still true. Belief begets belief. Faith motivates, comforts, inspires, and creates more faith in its place. Speaking of strange cosmic factors, we should probably talk about the actual wormhole here. Sisko and his long-life friend and current science officer, Jadzia Dax, are out in a runabout, and the wormhole opens up right in their faces. They lose contact with the station and vanish from their readings, and have essentially disappeared as far as DS9 is concerned. Turns out, they're 70,000 light-years away. And they didn't even pack lunch. When they turn around to go back through the wormhole, they find themselves somewhere. To Jadzia, it's the most beautiful place she's ever seen, a lush summer garden, but to Sisko, it's a craggy, mountainous wasteland beaten under a thunderstorm. I think this is reflective of their mental states at the time. To Jadzia, she's made an amazing scientific discovery, and she has a wonderful new job alongside one of her best friends. But Sisko's far from his son, and has been repeatedly reminded of Jennifer's death. That wound has been poked over and over again these last few days, so for him, this place is bleak and desolate. This is reinforced when he's pulled into a vision. He's engulfed in white light with the thump of a heartbeat pulsing around him. After a few moments, he's confronted by people he knows. Jadzia, Jake, Kayapaka, and other officers. Even Jennifer. But they're not quite right, and it's pretty clear they aren't his real friends. These are what the Bajorans call the prophets, and they constructed this wormhole as a sanctuary and home. The Bajorans call it the Celestial Temple, and this is where those prophetic orbs have been coming from that the Bajorans have been picking up, funneled down a cosmic tunnel. After the most recent orb had been found, 10,000 years ago, descriptions of the bright wormhole of otherworldly beings who have no time has become mythologized. These aliens don't name themselves, or have any individuals either, it seems. They don't even have corporeal form, borrowing pieces of Sisko's memories to interact, like manipulating puppets to act out a story. It's the best bridge they have to him, and so they speak through the mouths of Sisko's friends and family. Sisko, displaying remarkable self-control, keeps his calm and treats this as any other first contact scenario. But there's a sticking point. Because he's human, everything he says is ultimately through a corporeal, linear lens, and the prophets just aren't either of those things. In order to make them understand, he tries to explain what it is to be a linear species, but they're having trouble understanding the domino effect of causality. Humans exist only in the moment, in one point in time rather than all points in time, yet they keep showing him Jennifer and repeating, "You exist here." In The Haunting of Hill House, there's a girl, Nell, who's been haunted by her own ghost, her own death, the snapped neck of her hanged adult self terrifying her since she was 6 years old. This non-linearity has always been at the centre of her life, without her ever understanding who the bent-neck lady was until the moment that she falls from the house's balcony, her dying moments thrusting her back through every encounter she ever had with the ghost, and forcing her to look her frightened younger self in the eyes and complete that loop of fear. And I have to wonder about the nature of causality here. Did seeing her own dead self without realising the ghost's identity cause her to die in that house, in that way? Was there any way to avoid it, and what was even the trigger? Seeing the ghost? Moving to the house? The house has staked its claim on the family, and though it only managed to take her mother while Nell lived there, the whole family gets inevitably drawn back to it when the bent-neck lady starts appearing to her again as an adult. Nell had no option not to move where her parents went as house flippers, just as Jake has to go along with wherever Sisko's job takes him. It can't have been Nell's fault for entering the house, but it doesn't look like there's any fault to find. The house eats, the girl dies, 20 years after she moved away to escape the haunting. Her twin brother Luke also has a ghost from the house following him, and he feels it when Nell dies. There's a connecting force between him and his sister and the house. His whole body turns cold, clammy, and he's getting some terrible neck pain. Once he puts together that the house lured his twin home, Luke decides to burn it to the ground to stop it claiming anyone else, but even then, that was just the house doing what it would always do, drawing Luke back in. They were always going to return. Time means nothing to the house, and their mother's death has hung over Nell for as long as she can remember. There's no domino effect with the house. It simply is, and it's impossible to untangle the causality of her death or anything the house does. No matter what happens, she exists there. When we finally meet her ghost in a form that can speak, she says that
our moments fall around us like rain. Or snow. Or confetti.
the whole family's dysfunctional and at each other's throats while grieving Nell's death and trying to make sense of it. But to Nell, who's no longer experiencing linear time, none of it matters. She can put things in perspective and reconnect with a family she's been largely estranged from for years, because death has given her literally all the time in the world. None of those petty everyday problems or misunderstandings seem worth much compared to all the love she's had for them over the entirety of her life, and now she has the distance and perspective to stop and understand how each of her siblings has been shaped by the grief of losing their mother all those years ago. It's impossible to unpick cause and effect when time isn't behaving in a linear fashion, but we're still experiencing it as linear. It's like asking someone standing inside a labyrinth to draw a picture of the whole thing. But when events start to turn in on themselves and repeat and tangle, they've got to be influencing each other, right? Imagine that the universe is cylindrical, and energy always joins up with itself in the end, like a great Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. One big loop. This isn't a new idea, and it's seen in stories time and time again. And not only stories, the realist political philosopher Kenneth Waltz tried to make sense of the cyclical nature of history by inventing neorealism. The idea of cyclical time is a core part of many religions, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and the beliefs of the Quero natives of Peru. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius suggested that the universe might be organized in a succession of finite periods. Alternatively, consider the face of an analog clock. Time runs around in circles over and over, ad infinitum. Perhaps thoughts run along the outside of the circle, but actions run along the inside. People's consciousnesses running in loops alongside time and space, but also inside time and space. Something could happen at one point of the loop that's not been lined up precisely with the person who thought or did that thing yet, so it feels familiar or natural in a way that seems irrational. Déjà vu. Or maybe humans are just really good at pattern recognition. The important thing is that this is the kind of weirdness Sisko is confronted with when he has to think of the idea of everything happening everywhere all the time at once, because that's true for the prophets, but not for him. He's only experiencing this one isolated moment. I wonder how you'd express the energy of a thought as opposed to the energy of an action. Don't look at me, I suck at physics. Sisko finds himself grappling with the question of what time even is, but he doesn't have the benefit of chill lo-fi beats to study to and endless cups of tea the way I do. He tells the prophets that every choice he makes is dependent on every other choice he's ever made, and that his past experiences prepare him for every future moment. They speak through Jennifer's mouth as they observe the couple in the park, watching children play and mutually deciding to start a family. And Sisko tells them that their choice to have Jake was informed by every day up to this one, but that makes this particular day, this particular memory, incredibly special to him. It's one moment of joy that took many years of preparation to come to, but it's made all the sweeter because of the years of preparation. There's a satisfying conclusion in a linear story. Everything feels somewhat earned yet natural all at the same time. And now he has Jake, and I absolutely adore Sisko and Jake's relationship, but that is a tangent for another day. The prophets seem surprised by the idea of linear procreation. That's just not something that happens for them. But Sisko continues to explain how not knowing the outcome of the situation can be a joyful thing, rather than translating into fear of the future or a daunting unknown. Because he's kind of like that, Sisko uses baseball as his example of linear existence. The game may have been pretty much dead for centuries, but Ben loved baseball, and I kind of love that his passion for it somehow spills into his first contact with a new species. You can take the Ben from the baseball, but you can't take the baseball from the Ben. Anyway, the prophets are speaking through a memory of him in a holosuite baseball game, and say that it's similar to the strategized attacks that all the corporeal creatures they've encountered so far use on them. A barbaric practice, weaponizing the idea of consequence. Sisko laughs and explains that the bat's there to hit a ball, not another person, and that it's all a game. He tells them that you can try to anticipate where the ball will go and what the other team's strategy is, but that the game builds up one pitch after another, and half the fun is watching the game take shape. If we knew how the game was going to go, there'd be no point playing, would there? He says that the unknown defines our existence, and that he's found so much happiness in it so far. But the prophets return him to that worst memory again. They keep flicking back and forth through Sisko's memories, but always circling around Jennifer. Jennifer young on the beach when they first met. Jennifer in the park. Jennifer and their new baby son. Jennifer dead under the scaffolding. Always Jennifer, Jennifer, Jennifer. Sisko asks the prophets to stop bringing him here, that it's painful for him to be here. He has to explain, as calmly as possible whilst confronted with his dead wife over and over, what death is, and that Jennifer's lost to him. There's no returning to her, and she can never return to him either. A linear creature has an endpoint. But the prophets tell him that they aren't the ones bringing him here. Well, not quite. They just keep repeating, "But you exist here." And they're right. We keep bouncing away from Jennifer, but always circling back to her, like a tidal pull towards her, the gravity that shaped his life. He's still ruled by his time with her, by his love for her, and all the good she brought to his world, and his grief for her. We see her corpse again and again, as Sisko sees her in his nightmares over and over, unable to come to terms with his loss. The prophets ask him why, if there's so much joy in the way your species navigates time like you've told us, why do you keep returning to this moment? Why do you exist here? And he realizes that it truly isn't the prophets forcing him to be here, it's his own grief. This is where his mind dwells, and so when given a canvas to be freely represented upon, this is where he returns to, over and over. He exists here. His grief, and all grief, is non-linear. He finally stops and accepts it. He quietly sits down next to Jennifer's body as the prophets tell him to look for solutions from within, Commander.
I see her like this. Every time I close my eyes. In the darkness. In the blink of an eye. I see her like this.
None of your past experiences help prepare you for this consequence.
And I have never figured out how to live without her.
So you choose to exist here. It is not linear.
No. It's not linear.
He's haunted by Jennifer, or rather, his memory of her. He just wants to see her again so much that he replays those memories over and over again until he reaches that inevitable, linear conclusion. Removing linearity means she can be alive in him again. She's free from her endpoint, from her death, and Sisko wants that so badly that it's eating into his present. He tries not to let it invade his days, so it comes in the night instead, when his guard is down. And there's something to be said about ghosts always appearing in the night. In Hill House, even the skeptic of the family says that a ghost is a wish, and that's always stuck with me, because it's true. We find traces of the people we love everywhere, whether they've died or just become lost to time, in their favourite songs and turns of phrase and the stories we tell each other. In horror, a ghost is always present because it wants to be seen, it wants to be remembered. So often we see grief where someone's not moving on, unable to move on, trapped by the end of a loved one's linearity. It's like the next domino doesn't fall, doesn't want to fall. When is the grieving process going to end? I don't think it works like that. There's a line in the podcast I Am in Eskew, where the narrator says,
"Here's my question. If the ghost wants nothing more than to be witnessed, why would it appear behind you and not in front of you?" The only answer I can think of is this. It appears behind you because it already knows to an absolute certainty that you will have no choice but to look back.
We can never resist the pull of the dead, from that last chance to see the people we love one more time. We can chart that desire in our fiction from the modern shows I've mentioned all the way back to myths like Orpheus and Eurydice. The hero always looks. And even though it's often painted as a flaw, as a sort of weakness, it's always a heroic one, a human one. It's one born of love. Love drove Orpheus to descend into Hades in the first place to rescue Eurydice, and love compels him to look back for her, but it also becomes the reason he fails. Christoph Gluck's opera version of the story even has the gods forbid Orpheus from telling his beloved why he can't look back at her, But he does anyway to reassure her when she becomes afraid that he no longer loves her and is coming to the conclusion that death would be a better fate. How can we not look back? How can we deny our ghosts? Much later in the series, Sisko does find a new partner, Cassidy, and initially he's terrified of losing another wife to a political situation on the station. And given the tensions surrounding DS9 at present, that's a completely logical fear. But then he thinks back on his meeting with the prophets, and it grants him a new perspective on ordering his life, in how much joy there is to be found in exploring the unknown, always building with everything life has thrown at you so far. He's a Starfleet commander after all. His passion, as with all humans, is exploring, in answering questions and encountering new things. So he's going to push forward and let Cassidy do the same beside him. They'll explore together. As I couldn't say in the application for my master's degree, but I sure can say here, is it not human to fuck around and find out? And I can't help but think that if all of this is happening now, and will happen, and has already happened, then surely the prophets must know what Sisko's going to say. But they also know how much it will help him to actually stop and have to consider himself as a living, breathing existence, affecting and being affected by everything else in the universe. They want him to put it into words, to come to a personal understanding about the events of his life and how he's stuck in his own grief for Jennifer. And because of that, he's able to let go and find some peace in the whole situation. At the end of the series, when he has to be separated from Cassidy, he doesn't crumple in fear or despair at the uncertainty of everything, ruled by fear. When she asks him when he'll return, he simply says,
It's hard to say. Maybe a year. Maybe yesterday. But I will be back.
And that's some growth right there. He slowly becomes the emissary, spreading the philosophy of the prophets, even though he's not a follower of the Bajoran faith, trying to use his new perspective on life to help other species. He allows the chaos of life and time to take him where it will, while still making active and empathetic decisions. This is his life, and he's going to shape it. The longer Sisko spends on DS9, the more different ideas he connects with the concept of a space station. It's always been a different station to the one he lost Jennifer on, but now the idea of a station is a growing, thriving community where he's watching his son grow up, the continuation of his family. He relearns that joy of exploring, of the unexpected, and wants to experience it with his son. And it's only when he makes peace with Jennifer's death and with the idea of the prophet's reality that the wormhole becomes open to all, a stable and visible tunnel connecting this part of the galaxy to a fully unexplored new quadrant. They opened up a future for him to boldly go where no man has gone before.
This may be the last time we're all together. But no matter what the future holds, no matter how far we travel, a part of us, a very important part, will always remain here on Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
And I think about this concept a lot. Ever since I saw the first episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I've been caught, thinking about the idea that grief is non-linear. No matter how much time passes, I find myself circling back to it. I exist there,